Hey folks, welcome back. It's time. This is our last lecture of our entire course. You've made it to the end, and like I said last time, this lecture does not have anything new. It's not a traditional lecture. This is actually just going to be going through a case study. It's a rather large case study that's going to be going through some stuff covering our ABG stuff. It's going to be going through compensation. It's going to be going through stuff to do with the urinary system. So make sure you have that case study with you from that kind of practice bonus assignment that we talked about with the guy who had severe diarrhea. But after this lecture, you should be prepared for that final regular lecture exam, and immediately following that, it will be time for the final exam. But let's start, as always, with our not really attendance questions. COPD is likely to result in which pH imbalance? Starvation is likely to result in which pH imbalance? The pH of the body is acidic, alkaline, or neutral. Why do ADH and aldosterone always travel as a team? Why do they get secreted together? And what is the primary stimulus for ADH? So go ahead and try to answer those before listening to what the correct answers are. And let's see what these should be. COPD is likely to result in which pH imbalance? So this is something that's interfering with our ability to breathe. And if we can't breathe well, it means we're not exhaling carbon dioxide well. So carbon dioxide is building up in our body. And as CO2 goes up, what does that do to pH? pH goes down. So this is going to send us into respiratory acidosis. Respiratory acidosis is common in patients with COPD. Starvation is likely to result in which pH imbalance? Well, when your body is starving, it starts to break down fat and muscle as sources of energy. And byproducts of that are ketones. Ketones are going to drop your pH. So you go into a state of metabolic acidosis. Usually something specific, ketoacidosis. The pH of the body is slightly alkaline, 7.35 to 7.45. So it's a little bit above 7. That's alkaline. Why do ADH and aldosterone always travel as a team? Here I'm looking for more than they have overlapping stimuli. Yes, they're both released when blood pressure drops. I'm looking for why are they both needed? Well, aldosterone, remember, it causes sodium reabsorption. And it's doing that so that we can bring water along with it to raise our blood volume. But aldosterone, all it does is insert those sodium-potassium pumps into the DCT in the collecting duct. We can reabsorb sodium all day long, but if water can't get to it, then it's useless. ADH causes water reabsorption. It does that by inserting those extra aquaporins into the collecting duct and the DCT. But aquaporins allow water to get through, but water's not going to go through it if there's not a pulling force to pull it through. So aldosterone provides the pulling force by reabsorbing sodium. ADH provides the pathway by inserting those aquaporin type 2s. What is the primary stimulus for ADH? The primary stimulus is increased plasma osmolarity. So, here's our case study. A patient, Ed, presents with severe diarrhea that he's had for nearly a week. For each of the following, indicate if they would be increased, decreased, or unchanged. Assume compensation is occurring where this information is relevant. So there's our case study. And now if we look at that practice problem, part D of practice, I have a list of different values, and you tell me, based on this scenario, would each of these values go up, would it go down, or would they not be affected by this scenario? And here are our different items: urine output, ADH, glomerular filtration rate, osmotic pressure of the glomerulus, net filtration pressure, the patient's pH, his hydrogen ion or H plus secretion, PCO2 in his blood, respiration rate, renin release, the urine osmolarity, and glucose reabsorption. For each of these items, based on a patient with prolonged severe diarrhea, what will each of these items do in response? So here is what I was trying to tell you on that slide just a few slides back about what to expect on the exam. You will have a question similar to this. It won't be this question. It will be similar to this. And it will be presented this way. So this is how we will answer those questions. When we get one of these, the very first thing you want to do before answering any of these is answer, what is the patient's hydration state? Is he dehydrated? Is he adequately hydrated? Or is he overly hydrated? And then we want to answer, what is his pH imbalance? This is what we did at the end of last lecture. Does he have some sort of acidosis, alkalosis, or is he normal? So let's see first, if someone has severe diarrhea, what's that going to do to their hydration state? Are they going to be dehydrated, adequately hydrated, or overhydrated? Well, when you have diarrhea for a long time, you're losing water. This is actually one of the ways that people die from diarrhea, and I don't know if a lot of people realize that diarrhea is one of the #1 killers in the world. And when you die from diarrhea, you die from dehydration. So this person is dehydrated. We're going to use that information to answer some of these questions. Now, what is their pH imbalance? What does prolonged severe diarrhea cause? Well, you're losing that alkaline contents. So it leaves your body in an acidosis state. And since it's a metabolic problem, this is metabolic acidosis. And the problem told us to assume compensation is occurring where this information is relevant. So if we have metabolic acidosis, what type of compensation do we get? We get respiratory compensation. So this information here is what we're going to use to answer everything listed. Based on dehydration, metabolic acidosis with respiratory compensation, what will each of these items do? So now let's go over here and look at these things. What do I have here? I've got all of those things listed that were on your sheet, and I've got them written in 2 different colors. And what I've done is I've written all of the stuff related to hydration state in that kind of reddish ink, and all of the stuff related to pH in that bluish ink. That way, because I'm not going to go through and just answer them completely in order. I'm going to answer them kind of grouped together, the things that go with each other. So typically what I'll do is I will answer all of the pH-related stuff first, and then I will answer all of the hydration state-related stuff after that. So let's look at these blue items. And again, I'm not necessarily going to answer them all in order. I'm just going to answer all the blue stuff first. So I've got pH, H plus secretion, PCO2 in blood, and respiratory rate. The first one that I'm going to answer is pH, because that comes directly from his condition. Metabolic acidosis. What does that mean? Acidosis. It means that his pH is down. So his pH would be decreased. Now, if his pH is down, does he have too much H plus in his blood? not enough H plus in his blood, or the exact right amount of H plus in his blood. Low pH, pH decrease, acidosis, there's too much H plus. What does your body do if you have too much H plus? Do you want to get rid of it, or do you want to hold on to it? You want to get rid of it. And one way that we can do that is by having the kidneys secrete H plus. So H plus secretion will go up, trying to get rid of the H plus. Kidneys secrete it, and then ultimately it leaves the body in the urine. Now next, I'm going to skip over the PCO2 for a moment, and I'm going to drop down to respiratory rate. Now I'll show you why we do that. So if we have respiratory compensation for an acidosis, are we going to be breathing more or less or normal? If you have acidosis, your pH is down, what do we want to do? We want to raise that pH back up. How do you raise pH up? Well, we raise pH up by getting rid of CO2. How do we get rid of CO2? We breathe more. We increase our respiratory rate. When you are in a state of acidosis of any type, you're going to try to breathe more. Your respiratory rate is going to go up. Well, what happens when you breathe more? Every breath you get rid of CO2. So if you're breathing more, we're getting rid of more CO2, and the CO2 in our blood will drop. That's why I skipped over the PCO2, because the respiratory rate is the compensation, and because of the respiratory rate, that affects our CO2. Okay, so now we're done with all of the pH-related stuff. Everything that's left is going to be related to his hydration state. And again, I'm not going to do them necessarily in order, and I will explain why I'm doing each one in the order that I do it. So if someone is dehydrated, what did we just say is the hormone that keeps us from becoming dehydrated? ADH. Well, if you're dehydrated, is your plasma osmolarity going to be up or down? Are you going to have more water or less water in your plasma? You're going to have less water if you're dehydrated. And if you're having less water in your plasma gets thicker. The osmolarity goes up. And increased plasma osmolarity is the primary stimulus for ADH. So ADH goes up. Now we've got ADH in our body. What does ADH do? Well, it does a few things. In the kidney tubules, it causes them to reabsorb more water. That water leaves the filtrate to go back into the body. And if you're taking water out of the filtrate, does that result in more urine or less urine? It's going to result in less urine. So your urine output goes down. We don't want to urinate that water out. We want to keep it in our body. So urine output goes down when ADH is up. Next, if we're pulling water out of the urine, or out of the filtrate that will become urine, is that urine going to have more water or less water in it? It's going to have less water in it. So it's more concentrated. The osmolarity of that urine goes up. Urine osmolarity increases in response to ADH. So now let's look at renin. Renin is always going to be released at the same time that ADH is released. If I had aldosterone on here, aldosterone would also be released at the same time ADH is released. All of these hormones, ADH, renin, aldosterone, they're all released when you have a drop in blood volume, a drop in blood pressure. So renin release would go up. Now, when renin release goes up, it kind of ties hand in hand with ADH. Let's go over here and look at some stuff over on this side. Let's look at GFR, the glomerular filtration rate, the osmotic pressure in the glomerulus, and the net filtration pressure. These three I like to answer all at the same time, and the first one that I'm going to answer is the osmotic pressure in the glomerulus. The osmotic pressure in the glomerulus comes from the proteins and other solutes in the plasma. Now, as fluid enters the glomerulus, it's got the hydrostatic pressure pressing against the walls, trying to filter out. And then we've got all of those proteins pulling against the water, trying to pull the water back in. Now, if we have less water because we're dehydrated, it's as though we have more solutes. We don't really have more solutes, we just have less water, but the effect is the same. If we have more solutes in our blood, what's that going to do to the osmotic pressure? It's going to increase. When you are dehydrated, the osmotic pressure in your blood is going to go up because the hydrostatic pressure, the water portion, went down. Next, net filtration pressure. Well, osmotic pressure of the glomerulus, think back to when we were doing that drawing in kidneys. When osmotic pressure was up, net filtration pressure is down because osmotic pressure opposes net filtration pressure. Hydrostatic pressure in the glomerulus supports net filtration pressure, but osmotic pressure in the glomerulus opposes net filtration pressure. And if net filtration pressure goes down, glomerular filtration rate goes down. OPG, NFP, and GFR, lump those together. And if you have a hard time keeping them straight going through the way I just did, think about it this way. NFP and GFR will always be the same direction, and they will both be opposite OPG. And that leaves the glucose reabsorption. Well, remember, glucose reabsorption is always going to be 100% of normal. So we're always reabsorbing the same amount of glucose. Now, sometimes glucose is a little higher, it exceeds transport maximum, but we're still reabsorbing the same amount of glucose. So glucose reabsorption is going to be unchanged regardless of our situation. Glucose reabsorption is going to be unchanged regardless of our situation because we always reabsorb the same amount of glucose. Okay, so that is how we will answer these questions. If you see them on the future exam, know that this is how we answer them, and we answer them based on the hydration state of the patient and on the pH imbalance of the patient. Now, there is in the other kind of practice bonus assignment thing that's posted along with this one that says answer it for someone who has prolonged vomiting. I'm not going to go through that one. You guys can do that one for practice, but you should be able to do it now that we've done all of these in this example and all of those previous examples that we did with ABGs. Okay, so that brings us to the end of class. All that's left now is exam 5. So you should be ready at least for any potential case study that you might find. I will say that it will not be Ed with severe diarrhea or the guy with prolonged vomiting. We've done those now. So don't expect to see either of those, but you should expect to see something very, very similar to that you can still answer using that method that we've been practicing now. And then as soon as that's done, we have our final exam. There's going to be a lot back to back to back. We also, by the time you watch this, you may or may not have taken your last lab exam this time of the semester. I know it's rough, but it really pays off. You are there, you're at the end, it's time. So, with that said, you have now reached the end of a very long road. You've gotten through Bio 137, you've gotten through Bio 139. whether you had me just for 139 or whether you've had me for both. I love getting to teach, whether you had me in person or online, whether however you found these videos. Maybe you didn't even have me for an instructor. There are ways that you can get in touch with me. Please don't let this be the end of it unless you are tired of hearing my voice. I love being in touch with students, and I always like to tell my students, I don't stop being your teacher until you're ready for me to stop being your teacher. Down the road, it doesn't matter if it's next semester, if you're in micro, or 10 years from now when you are a health professional. If you end up going a different route, maybe you're working in lawn care, maybe you're working as a banker, maybe you are, whatever you're doing, you're going to have stories for me. You're going to have questions for me, whatever. Reach out anytime. My email, my phone number, I guarantee they're going to be the same. My Facebook is going to be out there. Reach out. I love hearing from old students. If you see me in Walmart or at the grocery store or whatever, stop and talk to me. Yeah, we don't lose touch unless you're ready for us to lose touch, okay? Take care, and I will talk to you when I talk to you. Good luck.